The Western Pacific, 3:22 a.m. Friday. Guam is not a base. It is a calculation. 44 square miles of volcanic rock in the Western Pacific, 1,500 miles east of the Philippine Sea, 1,800 miles southeast of mainland China. Home to Andersen Air Force Base, the only location in the Western Pacific where the United States can base strategic bombers within striking range of the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait simultaneously. Home to Naval Base Guam, the westernmost U.S. naval installation in the Pacific, the only deepwater port in the region capable of supporting carrier strike group maintenance and resupply. Home to the 36th Wing, the Marine Corps Base Camp Blas, a joint region Marianas command architecture that coordinates the full weight of U.S. military presence across the Western Pacific. The PLA Rocket Force's planners had spent 4 years studying the calculation. What they concluded was that Andersen Air Force Base was not just one target among many. It was the load-bearing wall. The strategic logic was precise. A Taiwan contingency required a strait crossing. Amphibious vessels and plan warships moving through the Taiwan Strait in a window that U.S. forces could not close quickly enough to stop. Closing that window required sustained air power from the Western Pacific. Sustained air power required Andersen. Andersen required a runway. The runway was 11,200 feet of reinforced concrete, sitting in the open on the Guam Plateau, unprotected by terrain, visible from space, photographed and measured by PLA reconnaissance satellites every 14 days for 6 years. If the runway was non-operational, the B-52H and B-1B bombers based there could not fly their strike missions. If they could not fly, the window closed. The math was not complicated. It was the foundation of what the PLA designated Operation Tianjian, Heaven's Sword. Tianjian called for a focused, overwhelming strike against a single target complex using a weapon system specifically developed for this purpose. The DF-26 B intermediate range ballistic missile, range 4,000 kilometers, circular error probable of approximately 10 meters with GPS enhanced terminal guidance, payload capable of carrying a conventional penetrating warhead, sufficient to crater reinforced concrete runways. The PLA had catalogued Guam as a DF-26B target since 2015. Western analysts had noted it. The DF-26B had been publicly referenced as the Guam Range platform in open-source defense literature. The PLA had not corrected the description. It was accurate. What Operation Tianjian introduced was not a new weapon. It was a new quantity. 61 DF-26B launchers had been positioned across 5 provinces over the preceding 9 days, under the operational cover of what imagery analysis had characterized as a large-scale PLARF readiness exercise. The cover was partially accurate. It was an exercise in the sense that every element of the operation had been rehearsed. It was not an exercise in the sense that the missiles were loaded, the targeting data was current, and the launch authorization had been received at 3:11 a.m. At 3:22 a.m., all 61 DF-26B launchers fired within a 94-second window. 61 missiles, all targeted at Andersen Air Force Base, all aimed at the runway complex, the fuel storage network, the maintenance infrastructure, and the B-52H alert parking area, where 4 bombers had been at ground alert readiness for the preceding 48 hours. The geometric distribution of the 61 impact points was not random. Each aim point had been assigned based on blast radius modeling, designed to ensure that overlapping damage patterns would eliminate the possibility of using any surviving runway section for emergency operations. This was not a strike intended to damage Andersen. It was a strike intended to make Andersen mathematically irrelevant to the Taiwan timeline for 72 to 96 hours. The space-based infrared system detected the first DF-26B launch plumes at 3:22 a.m., not the second or the 10th. The first. The 61 launches occurred within 94 seconds. SBIRS had all 61 tracks correlated within 40 seconds of the last launch. Alert transmission to INDOPACOM, PACAF, Andersen, and every Aegis-capable vessel in the Western Pacific was transmitted at 3:22 a.m., 31 seconds after the first launch. At Andersen Air Force Base, the launch alert activated the base's force protection protocol. The 4 B-52H bombers on ground alert were already in their engine start sequence at 3:23 a.m., an accelerated alert procedure that had been exercised 11 times in the preceding year. Alert aircraft engine start to wheels up required 14 minutes under the standard protocol. The DF-26B's flight time from launch positions in Guangdong and Fujian provinces to Guam, approximately 22 minutes. The margin was 8 minutes. It would be enough for the alert aircraft. It would not be enough for the base itself. The ground crew member responsible for clearing the alert aircraft's parking area had been at Andersen for 7 months. At 3:23 a.m., she was standing on the ramp next to one of the B-52HS when the klaxon sounded, and the launch alert reached her crew chief's radio. Her job in the next 90 seconds was to confirm that the parking area was clear of equipment and personnel before the aircraft's engines could safely advance to takeoff power. She did her job in 61 seconds. The aircraft began its taxi sequence at 3:24 a.m. 11 minutes and 14 seconds later, it rotated off Andersen's runway. The runway that would be non-operational in 9 minutes. The defensive engagement against 61 DF-26B missiles targeting a single point on the map was a problem of a specific mathematical character. The Aegis destroyer USS Shiloh, positioned in the Philippine Sea as part of Guam's ballistic missile defense screen, had a full SM-3 Block 2A magazine, 24 interceptors available for engagement. A second Aegis destroyer positioned north of Guam carried 18 SM-3s. Combined, 42 SM-3 Block 2A interceptors against 61 DF-26B warheads. The SM-3 engagement wasn't designed to solve the problem. It was designed to reduce it. SM-3 Block 2A launches from both destroyers began at 3:25 a.m. The DF-26B missiles were at mid-course altitude, their trajectories providing an engagement window. 32 SM-3 launches in the first salvo across both ships. The remaining 10 held in reserve for the engagement's second phase. 26 SM-3 intercepts achieved neutralization. 6 failed, 2 due to the DF-26B warheads executing terminal phase trajectory adjustments that degraded the SM-3 seeker's lock, 3 due to the compressed engagement geometry created by the density of simultaneously incoming tracks overloading the fire control solution generation rate, 1 due to an SM-3 motor anomaly logged for investigation. 35 DF-26B warheads survived the SM-3 layer. 10 additional SM-3s launched in the second salvo. 6 additional intercepts. 29 DF-26B warheads entered the THAAD engagement envelope. The THAAD battery at Andersen was the most capable terminal defense system the United States deployed. It was also a battery, a finite quantity of interceptors against a finite threat. Its ready load, 24 interceptors, against 29 incoming warheads. That engaged at 3:29 a.m. The battery's engagement sequencing prioritized the DF-26B tracks with the highest confidence targeting solutions for the runway's primary sections first, then secondary targets, then tertiary. 19 THAAD intercepts achieved neutralization. 5 DF-26B warheads survived to PAC-3 MSE terminal engagement. The battery had expended its full ready load. Reload cycle, 31 minutes under combat conditions. PAC-3 MSE batteries at Andersen's perimeter engaged the 5 surviving DF-26B warheads at 3:30 a.m. 3 were intercepted. 2 impacted within Andersen Air Force Base. The 2 PAC-3 misses were the difference between a runway that was temporarily unavailable and one that was comprehensively non-operational. The first DF-26B warhead impacted the primary runway's northern threshold at 3:31 a.m., generating a crater 6.2 meters deep and 18 meters in diameter through the reinforced concrete and into the subbase. The second impacted 340 meters further down the same runway surface at 3:31 a.m., creating a second crater of comparable dimensions. Two craters on the primary runway, 340 meters apart. Repair estimate under combat engineering conditions, 60 to 72 hours. But 29 DF-26B warheads had entered the THAAD engagement envelope. THAAD intercepted 19. The 10 that THAAD did not intercept before its ready load was were passed to PAC-3 MSE. PAC-3 MSE intercepted 8 of 10. 2 reached the base. Those 2 produced 2 runway craters. 26 other warheads, the ones intercepted by SM-3 and THAAD, had been neutralized above Guam before reaching their targets. The system had worked exactly as designed, layer after layer reducing the threat, each layer absorbing what the previous layer could not. The result was not perfect. 2 craters on a runway. The result was also not what Operation Tianjian had modeled. Tianjian's damage assessment had projected 11 to 14 warhead impacts across the Andersen runway complex, a figure its planners had calculated would produce 96 hours of non-operational status. 2 warhead impacts produced a 60 to 72-hour repair timeline instead. The difference was not trivial. In the context of a Taiwan Strait crossing timeline, 30 hours is not a rounding error. It is the window. The 4 B-52H alert bombers had departed Andersen's runway before the first impact. They were airborne. They had already received their mission tasking from PACAF before the first crater was created in the runway they had just left. They were 140 miles east of Guam, climbing to altitude, when the second crater formed in the concrete below their former parking spots. They would land at Tinian Island's emergency airfield, 12 minutes flight time from Andersen, and would be available for mission tasking within 4 hours of the Andersen impacts. They were not out of the fight. They were temporarily inconvenienced. In the Indopacom Command Center, the counter-operation had been activating since 3:22 a.m., within seconds of the DF-26B launch alert. The designation, STEEL MERIDIAN. 187 aim points across 112 PLA military installations, focused heavily on the PLA RFDF-26B infrastructure in Guangdong, Fujian, Yunnan, and Guizhou provinces, and on the targeting and command architecture that had supported Operation Tianjian. Full activation authority received at 3:33 a.m. 6 B-1B, Lancer bombers operating from Diego Garcia and 2 from Tinian, had been on alert rotation since 2 a.m. Elevated posture initiated 48 hours earlier, when the intelligence assessment first flagged the DF-26B repositioning activity as potentially pre-operational rather than exercise pattern. At 3:33 a.m., all 8 aircraft received STEEL MERIDIAN strike packages. Combined JASSM-ER payload, 192 missiles. At one point, $36 million per missile. $261.1 million of precision ordnance entering Chinese airspace in the first wave. By minute 14 from first launch, U.S. munitions expenditure had reached $648 million in SM-3 Block 2A interceptors. 42 launched, not all successful, each at $27.1 million. $187 million in THAAD interceptors and PAC-3 MSE, and was now adding $261.1 million in JUSASSMER offensive ordnance. Running total at minute 14, $1.096 billion climbing. 2B-2 Spirit bombers that had been on extended patrol from Diego Garcia received updated STEEL MERIDIAN tasking at 3:39 a.m. Their assigned targets, the PLA RFDF-26B Command Bunker Complex near Jianshui in Yunnan Province, designated for 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, and the Weinan Satellite Ground Station in Shanxi Province that provided GPS correction data for DF-26B terminal guidance. Without the Weinan station, any surviving DF-26B launchers would be operating on degraded terminal accuracy. The station had been a catalogued target in the Pacific Command's target architecture since 2019. IA-18G Growler electronic attack aircraft reached their jamming orbits over the South China Sea at 3:35 a.m. The PLAAF's Coastal Air Defense radar network began experiencing degradation within 5 minutes. The DF-26B mobile launchers in Guangdong and Fujian provinces had begun their post-launch displacement immediately after firing, a standard PLARF protocol that made the launchers themselves difficult to re-engage. Their fixed support infrastructure had not displaced. U.S. Cybercom began executing intrusion sequences against PLARF command software at 3:28 a.m., targeting the communication links between PLARF headquarters and the DF-26B battalion command posts. HARM anti-radiation missiles launched from F/A-18F aircraft at 3:40 a.m. 8 launches. 6 achieved guidance lock on active PLAAF early warning radar emitters along the DF-26B strike corridor. 2 guided on decoy emitters. Chinese corner reflector countermeasures identical in concept to those used by Iranian air defense crews in the Mediterranean exercises the previous year. A second pair was retasked based on Growler geolocation within 8 minutes. Both guided accurately. The JASSM-ER first impacts occurred at 3:51 a.m. DF-26B launch infrastructure in Guangdong Province. The survey positions, the reload missile storage facilities, the command vehicles, the fuel and maintenance infrastructure that supported the 61 Launcher Battalion began receiving precision engagement across 37 catalogued aim points. The mobile launchers had displaced. Their fixed support had not. Seismographs at Guangzhou University registered multiple low-magnitude events between 3:51 a.m. and 4:08 a.m. as the JASSMER engagement sequence progressed through Guangdong's DF-26B support infrastructure. The PLARF DF-26B infrastructure in Fujian Province received STEEL MERIDIAN engagement at 3:55 a.m. 29 aim points. Reload missile storage facilities, propellant storage, command relay stations, maintenance complexes. The physical infrastructure that turned 61 mobile launchers into a sustained strike capability rather than a single salvo weapon. Each precision impact was logged automatically in the STEEL MERIDIAN battle management system. Green indicators populating across the aimpoint matrix as weapon-to-target pairing confirmed impact. At 3:47 a.m., the adversary attempted its reserve contingency. The PLARF had pre-positioned a second DF-26B battalion, 24 launchers, in Guizhou Province, 200 kilometers further inland than the primary force, specifically designated as a reserve to fire a second salvo if the Tianjian first strike achieved its objectives and required exploitation, or if the first strike failed and a demonstration of continued capability was required. The Reserve Battalion commander lost communications with PLARF headquarters at 3:44 a.m. as U.S. Cybercom operations disrupted the command link. Following his pre-planned autonomous action protocol, which authorized a second launch if communications were lost and the primary strike timeline had elapsed, he ordered launch preparation at 3:47 a.m. 24 DF-26B missiles. Preparation time for the Reserve Battalion's launchers, 17 minutes. An RQ-4 Global Hawk operating at 60,000 feet over the Western Pacific had been monitoring the Guizhou Province area since 11 p.m. Its sensor feed reached the Indopacom Command Center at 3:48 a.m., showing the Reserve Battalion's launchers transitioning from transport to launch configuration. The targeting coordinator designated the Reserve Battalion as immediate priority at 3:49 a.m. 8J ASSMER missiles from a B-1B that had completed its initial Guangdong strike package were retasked via data link. 6 of the 8 successfully received updated coordinates before their retasking windows closed. 2 continued to original aim points. The 6 retasked JAS SMERs reached the Guizhou Reserve Battalion at 4:04 a.m. The Reserve Battalion's launchers were at 17 minutes into their preparation sequence. They were at ready status. 2 launchers had completed preparation and were seconds from launch authorization. The JAS-SMER impacts at 4:04 a.m. disrupted the battalion's command infrastructure and destroyed 4 launchers before they could complete their sequences. 18 launchers survived the initial JASSMER impact. 12 of the 18 were in various stages of preparation. 6 launched. 6 DF-26B missiles from the Guizhou Reserve. Launched without coordinated command authority, without updated targeting data from the Weinan Satellite Ground Station, which had been engaged by B-2 at 4:01 a.m. and was operating at degraded capacity, and without the geometric coordination that had characterized the Tianjian primary strike. The 6 reserve DF-26B launches were detected by SBIRS at 4:04 a.m. SM-3 Block 2A from the 2 Aegis destroyers, which had received partial reload from their onboard reserve magazines by 4:02 a.m., launched 8 interceptors. 5 of the 6 DF-26B warheads were intercepted at mid-course. 1 survived to THAAD range. THAAD, having completed a partial reload of 6 interceptors in the preceding 34 minutes, engaged. Intercept confirmed at 4:07 a.m. 0 additional impacts at Andersen. By 4:15 a.m., the primary phases of STEEL MERIDIAN were completing their first wave. Of the original 61 DF-26B missiles in the Tianjian first strike, 38 intercepted, 21 neutralized at THAAD and PAC-3 MSE, 2 impacted at Andersen. Of the 6 reserve DF-26B missiles, 5 intercepted, 1 intercepted by THAAD. Total DF-26B warheads that impacted Andersen Air Force Base, 2. 2 runway craters. 1 non-operational primary runway with a 60 to 72-hour repair timeline. 1 base that continued to function as a logistics hub, command node, and forward operating location throughout. The STEEL MERIDIAN battle damage assessment was running simultaneously. Of 187 aim points engaged in the first wave, 163 confirmed neutralized. DF-26B reload infrastructure in Guangdong, 34 of 37 aim points. DF-26B infrastructure in Fujian, 26 of 29 aim points. PLA-RF command bunker at Jianshui, penetrated at 4:09 a.m. by 2 GBU-57 MOPs. Structural integrity assessed as non-functional. Weinan Satellite Ground Station, 68% functional degradation assessed. At 4:18 a.m., the PLA-RF's DF-26B force in Guangdong and Fujian provinces reached a level of infrastructure degradation that its own operational planning had designated as below threshold for coordinated second strike capability. The mobile launchers were physically intact, dispersed across the provinces in their post-launch displacement positions. But their reload missiles were in storage facilities that had been engaged. Their propellant was in tanks that had been engaged. Their command links had been disrupted. Their targeting data feed from Weinan was degraded. A mobile missile launcher without reload missiles, without fuel, without command connectivity, and without reliable targeting data is not a strategic asset. It is a vehicle. The PLA-RF command structure attempted to communicate this to its surviving battalion commanders. The communication was intermittent, degraded, and ultimately insufficient to coordinate a third strike. The last logged PLA-RF command transmission received by a DF-26B battalion was at 4:31 a.m. An encrypted message instructing surviving elements to maintain launch readiness and await further orders. The further orders did not arrive in any operationally useful form. The battalion commanders waited. The orders did not come. Final STEEL MERIDIAN weapon impact logged at 4:22 a.m., 60 minutes after the first PLARF DF-26B launch. Time from first PLARF launch to first U.S. intercept, 3 minutes. Time from detection to counter-operation authorization, 11 minutes. Time from first launch to final U.S. weapon impact, 60 minutes. PLARF weapons launched. Primary strike, 61. Intercepted, 59, 96.7%. Warhead impacts at Andersen, 2. Primary runway non-operational, estimated 60 to 72 hours. Aircraft lost on ground, 0. B-52 are alert aircraft recovered and mission capable, 4, at Tianjian, within 4 hours. PLARF weapons launched. Reserve strike, 6. Intercepted, 6, 100%. Additional impacts at Andersen, 0. STEEL MERIDIAN aim points engaged, 187. Confirmed neutralized, 163 of 187, 87.2%. DF-26, B reload and support infrastructure below operational threshold. Guangdong, 91.9%. Fujian, 89.7%. PLARF primary command node, non-functional. Wainan targeting station, 68% degraded. PLARF DF-26, B second strike capability, below coordinated threshold. U.S. munitions expended total, $1.74 billion. PLARF military infrastructure replacement value assessed lost, 8.9 to $11.2 billion. Exchange ratio, approximately 1 to 5.8. Operation Tianjian had been built on a calculation. The calculation was correct in its strategic logic. Andersen was the load-bearing wall. Remove Andersen, remove the B-52HS, remove the window closing capability, and the Taiwan Strait crossing becomes viable within its operational timeline. The logic was sound. The implementation was insufficient. 61 DF-26B missiles had produced 2 runway craters. 2 craters that would be repaired in 60 to 72 hours. 2 craters that had not produced the 96-hour non-operational window the PLA planning staff had modeled. 2 craters that the 4 B-52H alert bombers had left behind on a runway they departed before the first impact. The load-bearing wall was temporarily cracked. It was not removed. Cracked load-bearing walls can be repaired. The repair timeline was 60 hours. The Taiwan contingency window required 96. The 36-hour gap between what Operation Tianjian achieved and what it needed to achieve was not a rounding error. It was the entire calculation, returning an answer the PLA planners had not modeled, 60 minutes. That was the duration of the PLARF's most ambitious conventional strike operation since its founding. In 60 minutes, the DF-26B infrastructure that had taken a decade to build and position had been reduced by 91% across Guangdong Province and 89% across Fujian Province. 2 runway craters had been created. The runway would reopen in 60 hours. The infrastructure that had created those craters would take considerably longer to rebuild. The arithmetic was not complex. It was simply not what the calculation had intended to produce.